Whenever a huge tech wave hits, everyone scrambles to find the next killer app. But what if the real, long-lasting money isn't made by chasing trends, but by owning the very foundation everything else is built on? Okay, let's really dig into what that means for the AI revolution.
And this quote from our source material, it just hits the nail on the head. It's making a really powerful point. History shows us that the truly massive fortunes, they didn't come from just using a new technology. They came from owning the essential plumbing that made it all possible for everyone.
So you've really got two ways to play this. On one side, you can chase the hot new AI app. And look, that's a high-stakes game. You could win big, or you could get wiped out overnight. But on the other side, you've got this idea of owning the foundational assets, the digital picks and shovels of this AI gold rush. That's a strategy built for endurance, for the long haul.
So, why is this foundational approach so darn powerful? Well, to really get it, you just have to look back in time. Because this AI boom, as crazy as it seems, isn't some totally new thing. It's actually following a pattern we've seen again and again.
Think about it. Back in the 19th century, the biggest fortunes were built on railroads, the network that moved everything, not necessarily on the companies using the trains. Then, in the 20th century, it was the electrical grid, the thing that powered every home and factory. Then came fiber optics for the internet. See the pattern? Each time, the real, durable wealth came from owning the underlying network. And today, that network is AI infrastructure.
All right, so we keep using this term infrastructure, but what are we actually talking about when it comes to AI? This isn't just about clever software or algorithms. No, we're talking about massive, physical, and absolutely critical stuff. Let's break it down.
We're talking about the real-world nuts and bolts. These gigantic data centers, literally the buildings that house all this intelligence. The specialized chips, like GPUs and TPUs, that are the brains of the whole operation. You've got these incredible, advanced cooling systems just to stop the whole thing from melting down. And, of course, the enormous energy assets needed to power it all. The whole shebang comes together in what we call high-performance computing clusters.
And that definition right there, it tells you everything you need to know about why this is such a big deal. These clusters aren't something you can just whip up in your garage. They cost billions of dollars, they have to be in specific places with access to insane amounts of power, and they take years to plan and build. That difficulty, that complexity, that's what creates a huge competitive moat. Okay, so we know what these things are, and we know they're incredibly hard to build. But how does that actually translate into a real-life strategy for building generational wealth? Let's get into the specifics.
First up, and this is absolutely crucial, is that barrier to entry we just talked about. The sheer cost, the time, the complexity, it's just off the charts. This is not like a software startup where two people can build an app. You cannot just code a new data center into existence. And that scarcity is exactly what creates so much lasting value for the ones that already exist.
And here's the other thing. Once these things are built, they are built to last. A really well-designed data center or power plant can run for 20, even 30 years. Now, for an investor, what does that mean? It means decades of predictable, recurring cash flow. Not just for a couple years, but maybe for an entire generation.
So let's just pull this all together. You've got these assets with a super long useful life, which means predictable cash flow for decades. You have this accelerating demand that doesn't really care what the economy is doing. AI's hunger for computing power just keeps growing. And because we're talking about real physical assets, they're a natural hedge against inflation. I mean, that is a seriously powerful combination. But okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. No investment is a sure thing, right? It is absolutely essential to look at the potential downsides here. Because being a smart investor means you understand the risks, not just the potential rewards. So, a big worry people have is, what if the technology changes too fast? What if my expensive chips are obsolete in 3 years? But here's the reality. The chips are just tenants in the building. The core asset, that secure building, the massive power hookup, the insane cooling system, that retains its value. You can just swap out the old servers for new ones. And what about regulation? Governments are getting worried about how much energy these things use and about data privacy. You'd think that's a bad thing for investors, right? But here's the twist. All that complexity can actually be an advantage. The strict rules make it even harder and more expensive for new, smaller companies to even get into game, which just strengthens the position of the big, established players who know how to navigate it all. All right, so if you're listening to all this and thinking, okay, this makes a lot of sense, the next question is obvious. How does a regular person actually invest in this stuff? How do you get a piece of the action? Well, you've basically got 3 main paths you can take. For most folks, the public markets are the easiest entry point. You can invest in specialized REITs that own data centers or utilities. Now, if you have more capital, the private markets open up and you can co-invest in new projects. And then, at the very, very top end, you have ultra-high net worth families actually building their own facilities from scratch.
At the end of the day, what we're really talking about here is a total shift in how you think about investing. This isn't about chasing the next quarterly earnings report. It's about taking a much longer view. It's about stewardship, really.
And honestly, I don't think it can be summed up any better than this final quote from the source material. Look, using AI is great. It's convenient. Building AI apps might make you some money. But owning the essential infrastructure, well, that's like owning the toll booths on the superhighway of the future. You get to collect a little bit from almost everyone who drives by for a long, long time.
So as this AI revolution keeps unfolding, the question you see here is the one that really matters for anyone thinking long-term. It's not about if you should be involved in AI, but how. Do you have the foresight to look past the shiny new apps and own the very foundation that everything else will depend on?